Thanks for tuning into the Replatform podcast sponsored by Amplience Clavio. You're listening to myself, James Gedd, and my co-host, Paul Rogers. How are you doing, sir?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm good. I'm just laughing at your busy social calendar and how exhausted you are.
Not hungover for once today, which is good.
Yeah, excellent. So thanks to all our regular listeners for tuning back in, and a warm welcome if it's your first time. We hope you enjoy it. Do subscribe, you'll get new episode alerts, and we'd love a like on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. Right, so let's set up our topic and then introduce our guest. So our topic is going to be on advanced search and merchandising with advanced commerce. Some of you will know advanced commerce. For others, you'll be new to the technology. So what we're going to cover is what advanced commerce is and their position in the market, the benefits more advanced merchandising can add to an e-commerce business, the advantages of combining search, merchandising, and recommendations in one toolkit, and how advanced commerce is going to market, what the offer is. So let's welcome our guest, Andre Brown, who's the founder of Advanced Commerce. How are you doing, Andre?
I'm doing really well, James, and thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you come on. I enjoyed the recent demo I had with you. It was exciting to look at the toolkit and how it's changed and advanced over the years. I think, let's start with you telling people who are listening who might not know what advanced commerce is and what you do. Give it an introduction to what it is, what your role is, and what's happening at the moment.
Sure. So, I guess my claim to fame is prior to Advanced Commerce, I was actually the co-founder and former chief exec of Attract. That was a business that I ran for 15 years and really grew that from zero to becoming the leading European player in search and merchandising. And that journey involved taking the company public in 2014. And in 2017, we acquired Fred Hopper, who were our biggest competitor at the time, and left in 2018 to start Advanced Commerce. We basically spent 3 years building a brand new search, merchandising, and personalization platform. And we launched that about a year ago, and we've been growing pretty quickly since then. And for those who are not familiar with merchandising, in the online world, merchandising really is about controlling the product display sequence. So what products do you show where, and specifically in which order? And the problem this addresses, and your users will recognize this from their own browsing behavior, is that your typical site visitor will only look at the first 2 or 3 pages, if that, in fact, in some cases. So for your typical visitor, they're looking at maybe 3%, 5% of your product catalog. And that's a very small proportion of the overall catalog. And kind of once you understand that fundamental problem, it suddenly makes the decisions that you as a retailer take about what to show first, particularly on each category page, incredibly important. And it's much like the care and attention that retailers pay to shelf space in a physical store. It's kind of the same problem. And that's the issue that we address by providing retailers with much better tools for controlling that merchandising.
Great. And I'll ask the first question. So I think the first time we were introduced was probably about 3 years ago by a mutual friend, Ozzy from Akuva. And he introduced you guys as like a new up-and-coming e-com platform that, had a really good capability when it came to search and merchandising. Since then, you've kind of pivoted to being a search and merchandising platform, similarly to Attract, I guess. What led to that pivot?
Yeah, so absolutely right. So our original intention was to create a framework for headless commerce, and hence the company name, Advanced Commerce. And really what caused us to pivot to that is we realized quite early on that the whole sort of composable headless space is very much an enterprise space right now. And that has an impact on things like sales cycles, tech delivery lead times, and so on. And we kind of felt that actually, that wasn't the right space for us. But we'd already started developing a search and merchandising technology really as a microservice. And we had really good feedback from that. And, it's kind of what we know, from my time at Attract. And also I felt, probably had unfinished business from that time. And this was a chance to do things differently a second time around. So that's why we ended up pivoting.
That makes sense. And as we've said a few times, you started Attract. You did that for a long time. And that, Attract played in a number of different spaces. Like, what's the difference with the strategy with advanced commerce? Like, how do you plan to go out to market with advanced commerce?
Certainly. So I think there's probably two things to think about. One is when we launched, we said we are aiming to bring enterprise grade merchandising to the mid-tier. And that's very much what we're doing. We're having a lot of success right now with mid-tier retailers. And I think the reason for that is our user interface is incredibly easy to use, and it's being designed to be used by non-technical people. So it doesn't require any kind of specialist knowledge. I think the other aspect was, well, what are the lessons that we can learn from my time at Attract, to differentiate ourselves? And there are two, really. One is around delivery, and the second one is around user interface, as I've just mentioned. And really with delivery, it's all about having a product that can be implemented by retailers themselves or their technical agencies. And we've very much designed it to do that.
Excellent. So it'd be useful to run through the product in a bit more detail. And I'd really love to hear the clarification of what enterprise grade means practically. So from looking at the key differentiator when we talked the advanced merchandising side, could you talk us through where that is currently and what you mean by bringing enterprise grade merchandising to the mid-tier?
Sure. So I guess what you mean is you can look at a lot of merchandising offerings, particularly aimed at Shopify and Magento. A lot of them tend to be based on an existing search engine technology, and the merchandising really is about boost or bury, or pin things to the top. Whereas we have some unique functionality within our platform, things like merchandising blends, merchandising templates, merchandising concepts, and so on. And these are all aimed at giving retailers incredible control over the sequencing of products, and very specifically where you want that sequencing to appear. And things like persona merchandising, so you can actually be very specific about what different types of personas will see on your site. So, we're very clear that it is enterprise grade functionality, and some of that functionality really is unique to us. And that's back to, I've had a lot of time to reflect on my time at Attract and how would I improve things. So that's part of it. I think other things are, we definitely compete on speed. It's an incredibly fast platform. If you look at the part of the reports, you can actually look at how quickly things are processing. We're typically processing searches in a millisecond, and it's incredibly quick. And then other aspects, I think with the delivery, although we are a SaaS model, we're very much an assisted SaaS model. So typically with a client that's working with an agency, we would have weekly project calls with them, as opposed to just saying, well, here's the link to the documentation, figure it out yourself.
Excellent. And in terms of the user interface, what is it that you focused on specifically? Like, what have you perceived, or what feedback have you had in the past where people have struggled with elements of the user interface and using the tooling, and what did you try and simplify?
Sure. So a number of things. I think the first thing is we've tried to make it a very logical step by step. So you'll probably notice that when you've seen the demo, we kind of explain it very simply. I start with a merchandising blend that creates my product sequence. Then if I want something more advanced, I'll put it onto a template, which then determines where I see the sequence, and so on. And it's almost like building up layers, say in Photoshop, sort of similar concept. So I think that's part of it. And sorry, just remind me the other part of that question, James.
Yeah, I was just thinking about some of the frustrations that you've seen in previously where people struggle to use.
Sure. Yeah. So I think one of the frustrations from my time at Attract is it wasn't very modular. So I would have to kind of create like a rule that has everything in it, and I'd create that, say, for a category page. But if I wanted something similar for search or for type ahead, I'd have to basically recreate that rule. Whereas what we've done is to make it much more modular. So I can create a merchandising blend, which creates the product sequence, and I can reuse that. I can use it for search, I can use it for type ahead, I can use it for personalization. Another frustration was, well, what kind of data can we use to create these blends? So product attributes are obvious ones, but we noticed, for example, there are times when you might want to create a custom range. So let's take price as an example. Normally within a sequencing blend, you would assign price as one of the metrics, and you'd be setting ascending or descending price order. But if you want, what do you do if you want to target people at a mid-range price? That doesn't really help you ascending or descending because they're in the middle. So you can create a custom range where you just say, look, I'm going to de-weight everything above and below a certain price range and really focus on that mid-range price. So that's one example. Another example is the ability to create a merchandising concept and include that within a blend. So an example of merchandising concept might be summer colors or long dresses. So we've got the ability to define a concept and kind of what makes something a long dress or what makes something summer colors. And then you can create your own merchandising blends using those merchandising concepts. So in effect, you're able to create your own theme pages just by using our platform without having to recreate the actual page, because it will just run off any category page. So it's things like that. Persona merchandising is another one. So, I think there's a huge disconnect right now between marketing and merchandising. And really what I mean by that is, I went to MadFest last week, it's a big marketing event, and everybody's focused on audience segmentation. How do you segment an audience? How do you identify that? What's the right channel to approach them? What's the different messages for different segments? But it struck me the outcome is the same. If people respond to that targeted message, they come to your website and they get exactly the same product sequence, regardless of what segment they belong to. And the whole thing with persona merchandising is looking to say, well, look, if we know somebody's a fashionista, don't show them stuff that's cheap. Show them the latest things, do descending price order. If you know somebody's a bargain hunter, then let's show them the things that are cheap on sale. If somebody's loyal to certain brands, let's show them those brands first. So what we're trying to do there is kind of close that disconnect between the work you've done in segmenting an audience and making sure that each audience will then get the sequence and strategy that's appropriate to them.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would be great is, can you give us some examples of wins you've seen where brands have used more advanced logic and talk people through what have they done and what the impact was? And I know it will be anonymized for obvious reasons.
Sure. So, some simple quick wins will be just sorting out your search. So search on most sites is pretty poor generally. And it's ironic because search generally converts much more highly. And a slightly more advanced version of that is sorting out your type ahead and mini landing pages, which really do convert very highly. So just to give you an example, one of my clients emailed me with an update on performance improvements since they went live. So the stats he gave me were site search conversion went up 59.51%. Per search value went up 89.4%. So really quite a significant uplift just by sorting out search. With product recommendations, again, a big complaint when I was at Attract is it's a bit of a black box. What people mean by that is, well, what do I do if I don't like the outcome? We like the automation of it, but what do I do if I don't like the outcome? And because our platform treats search, category pages, and personalization all as the same thing, you can apply the same strategies and blends and templates and so on to product recommendations. And with this particular client, he saw his product recommendation conversions go up just over 5%. But when you marry that to an increase in AOV, which is 18.75%, then he saw his product recommendation revenue go up nearly 15%. And it's very common for us to see AOV go up and the volume of orders go up. And I think the reason AOV goes up is because you're now being more specific about that, what you show in that first couple of pages. And typically what people are doing is sequencing it by higher price first, along with the other metrics. So I think that naturally boosts your AOV. And then I think the volume increase in orders is probably a product of conversion rate. And again, I think that's down to showing more appropriate products in that mix.
What is Amplience? In a word, it's freedom. The freedom to build a digital experience as limitless as your vision. Create, preview, schedule, and manage all your content in one easy place. Find out more at amplience.com. Amplience. Experience freedom.
Great. And I guess you're primarily working with Magento and Shopify currently, or at least that's my assumption based on some of the clients you've been working with from our side. Do you intend on broadening this? Are these kind of the two main focuses for you? Or is it just a case of, these are the platforms that have a bit more demand around them at the moment?
So we certainly have a lot of Shopify and Magento clients at the moment. We also have some clients on SAP Hybris, Shopware, Web Select, and several in-house systems, and we'll very shortly have a client on Salesforce. It's kind of just been led by who's responded to our reaching out to them. Really, we haven't specifically said we're going to focus on one particular platform, but I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of interest in Shopify right now. I think in March we signed 6 new clients, and 5 of them were on the Shopify platform.
That makes sense. I guess presumably one of your most common customers is fashion, and obviously fashion is quite closely aligned with Shopify at the moment.
Yes, that's right.
That makes sense. And then, so the next question. So I think a lot of people see the Holy Grail as like machine learning and personalization working across search, the category grid or the collection grid, and then product recommendations and kind of data being shared around both an individual user and the kind of combined performance of items across those areas. Is that something that your product does? I know that's something that's frustrated some of our clients in the past with other vendors. Do you essentially build up that kind of knowledge across all 3 areas?
So I think there's actually quite a wide spectrum of use cases. I think at the one side, you've basically got people who just want you to set and forget it. Set it, forget it, just let it run. And that's obviously, AI heavy. I think at the very far opposite end of that, you've got people that want to largely manually merchandise it. And then somewhere in the middle, it's a kind of mixture of AI and rules-based with a bit of manual merchandising. So, most of our clients tend to be in that middle section. And for a lot of them, they'd only do manual merchandising when they're doing an email campaign, and they just want to make sure that what goes out in the email is exactly mirrored on the landing page. So generally, people are using a mixture of AI and rules-based with a little bit of manual merchandising. I also caution people, we do use AI, obviously, but I think there are flaws in the AI model. And, I joke about the sort of Freddie Mercury analogy with X Factor. So imagine we did X Factor using AI. X Factor, you build a model that says, well, we know what a boy band looks like. We know what, there's 4 of them or 5 of them, one wears a leather jacket, whatever. We know what a girl band looks like, what a female singer looks like, blah, blah, blah. And you view everything through that lens. But what happens when a young Freddie Mercury turns up? Kind of doesn't really fit into any of those models, and, computer says no. So I do say to people, you need to think about this. You need to think about, an over-reliance on AI is kind of retrospective. And, it won't help you sell stuff that is slow selling. It won't help you figure out that problem. And it doesn't really lead you to being a trendsetter. If anything, it might lead you to being, into a bit of a race on price, actually. So that's what I say to people. Do you want to be a trendsetter, or do you want to be an order taker? So a bit provocative, but there we go.
That makes sense. And I guess your point there around the role of AI leads me nicely on to the next question, which is when you talk to a lot of the vendors in the market, they're usually quite pro heavily relying on their kind of intelligence and allowing, their algorithms to learn, and then end up kind of, better sequencing products based on the triggers and input that they use. What's your view on this? You obviously just talked about the importance of business logic and, things like stock, etc. Where do you think the right balance is?
So I mean, just to reiterate, we do use AI in our platform, and it does a lot of the heavy lifting. And I think it's very good for kind of the long tail. But when you go back to the example of your typical visitors, only look at the first 2 or 3 pages, that's really where you want the expertise of the merchandiser involved, because typically they know how to sell their stuff, or it might be that they've got new stock and there's just no data available for AI, in which case you really are relying on the human person having much more control over that product sequencing. So we've designed this tool really to be used by merchandisers and people that want to trade through their site. So it's a heavyweight merchandising platform. It's not a kind of AI widget, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I've worked with enough premium brands where the transaction volume is low, but the value is high, and the frequency of visit in commerce terms is really, really low. It's not like fast fashion. And the biggest demand of the toolkit is the visual merchandising control and the ability to and control the rules and overlay on top of the baseline. So 100% agree. You need that balance. But you also sometimes need the machine to do it when you don't have the time to merchandise every page, basically.
Yes, exactly.
So you talked earlier about the structures in the tool, and you talked about templates. Can you explain what is a template? What do you mean by it? And how do templates add value to business users? What's in it for them?
Sure. So back to the analogy of sort of layers in Photoshop. So my base layer is a merchandising blend. So that's what creates the product sequence. And if I don't use a template, it'll just do the whole category page or the whole search page for me. So what are templates? The template's like the next level up or next layer up. And what it lets you do is to say, well, there might be pages where I want more than one blend on the page. So it lets you create shapes on the page and then kind of paint shapes on the page and then say, well, I'm going to have this different merchandising blend here and so on. So you might end up, for example, having certain rows that are new in, some shapes that might be bestsellers and other things that might be high value trending or something like that. And it's not just blends. I mean, it could be filters. So a good example that people might use a template for is when you have an ambiguous search term. So let's imagine I'm selling running shoes and somebody types in Nike trainers. Well, you haven't said, are you male or female? I don't know. So what you might do is have a template that says, well, when you search for Nike trainers, I'm going to show you women's on the left, men's on the right. Or another example, for in sports field, people search for pants. What do they mean? They mean jogging pants, or do they mean underpants? So that's another example where you can use a template to disambiguate search. Let's imagine you're selling shoes to school kids. So, as you approach the end of the school term, you might use a template to say, well, we're going to put stuff that they might buy in preparation of going on holiday higher than school shoes. And I might do that at a category level and also on a search level. But, it's now towards the end of the holidays, we're getting ready for school. I might reverse that. So it's about giving people a lot more control over where the blends or filters might appear. And then, other layers up, we've got ad spots. So you can actually create your own inline ads and promotions. So that would kind of trump what was underneath it. And then the top layer is manual merchandising, which is kind of king of the hill and trumps everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's quite nice added value that you can cut different rules to different elements of it. And you can create different visual merchandising patterns by using different zones within that template. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. The next question that will be on everyone's minds is, what reporting do you have within the tool? So to what level of granularity, what data do people get by standard, like what the standard dashboards, how can they get more advanced reporting out of it?
Sure. So we report, basically the performance of the product, our platform rather. So it reports on things like the merchandising strategies, the effectiveness of blends and templates and so on. And you can drill down. So you can, drill down by day, for example. You can export it as a CSV file, which is very useful. You can set a date range, all that kind of stuff. It will report on product performance. So you can see that in terms of click-throughs, add to basket, purchases. It reports on category page performance. So you can see which categories produce your best click-through rates or add to basket or purchases. And then with things like search, does a similar thing with search, but we also have what's called a null results, no result report. So that will report on what search terms have you got that produce either 0 results or low numbers of results. And the purpose to do that is that might then give you a clue of synonyms perhaps that you should create or search to redirects and so on. And then something that it's not strictly reporting, but it's kind of related, which I really like, is something called merchandising insights. And what that lets you do is it lets you see for any given page on the front end, it will show you an overlay so you can see the score that each product has scored in our kind of internal logic to explain why is that product there. Because we did this because we get phone calls from customers saying, we've just applied a new rule or applied a template and can't quite understand why something's where it is. So we call it merchandising insights. It shows you the scores. It also shows you the logic, so you can understand the logic that we've gone through to arrive at that. And this is the thing I mentioned earlier. It also shows you gives you an overview of site performance, and you can just see how quick things are.
Do you have the ability to show the average click-through rate per position in the grid? Sorry if I missed that.
No, do you know what?
I've been doing things that where people want to know, do they really need their best products in the top 2 or 3? Can they still get a good click-through rate in position 4 or 5?
That's a good question. And unfortunately, the answer at the moment right now would be no, but that is one of the things on the roadmap.
Yeah, it's a never-ending feast, is it, in terms of what data you people might want to use? Okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Great. And then leading on from you using the word roadmap, so final question, what is on the roadmap for the rest of this year and next year of advanced commerce?
Sure. So first of all, the thing to say is, a roadmap is largely driven by what our clients ask for, just to say that. So right now, we've got native A/B testing out on test with one client. So currently, we would support A/B testing through Google Optimize, but we've got a native version which is out testing right now. And then the second thing to say is a lot of our roadmap currently, actually is assigned to connectors. So we've got, we're building connector for Salesforce Commerce Cloud, building a connector for Amplience, and building a connector for Elastic Path. So that's quite a big part of it. And then the rest of it probably is, we constantly get suggested enhancements to a UI, which is really useful, actually. And then the other aspect of it is things that help making onboarding quicker and easier. And some of it is kind of back-end automation, which is more kind of DevOps, because as we grow the business, the whole kind of DevOps things becomes more important. We're at about 25 clients right now. By the time we get to 100 or so, then DevOps will be increasingly more important.
Do you, and I guess the other one that I think I've already asked you a few times is, on that roadmap, is there the ability to use the Shopify API for VMing?
So currently we have a Shopify app, but it's a private app, so it's not in the marketplace. So right now, that's how we would connect to Shopify clients. We do plan for that to become a public app at some point. We wanted to go through at least one iteration with a cohort of Shopify clients before we release that.
That makes sense. I more mean the so using the native Shopify grid. But I'm sure I spoke to your colleague when we met before, and I think that is something you plan on doing.
Yeah, in fact, this is what we were hoping to discuss with you tonight, actually.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll can discuss it over the next few days. Sure.
Yeah, no problem.
That's great. So we've answered all the key questions. I guess people might have some additional thoughts that they might want to probe in more detail in terms of how things work technically, or to look at the back end and the demo. How do they connect with you, Andre?
They can connect on our website. There's the option to book a meeting with me. They can email me directly. I'm Andre at advancedcommerce.io. They can find me on LinkedIn. Any of those methods, really.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And thanks everyone for listening. We hope it's been interesting. Some of you will have discovered the platform for the first time. Others will have learned more about it. Do reach out to Andre if you want more detail. Thank you for listening. Keep an ear open for the next episode. We drop one every Tuesday. And do subscribe if you haven't already to get weekly alerts. And we'd love a rating on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. Take care, everybody. Until next week. For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host Paul Rogers via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.